Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to be diving into the Global Market Navigator Report number 9 this week. Really got to give a huge shout out to Bill Cara for all the incredible work he does. You can find his stuff over at billcara.com. We're going to assume you're already pretty familiar with the market, so we're going straight for the really interesting stuff. We're going to be looking for those real hidden gems of insight that Bill is so good at pulling out. This week was a wild one. Tariff threats, then suspensions, then reversals. It was like a roller coaster. Compared to Report 8, what's your take on the overall mood of the market?
Well, one thing that really stood out to me in this report, compared to Report 8, it seems like there's even more uncertainty and transition. Everyone's on edge trying to figure out what the next move is in this global economic chess game. But the rules keep changing.
Yeah, totally. And speaking of that roller coaster ride, let's talk about the U.S.-Canada tariff drama. It's really not just political posturing anymore. It's having a real impact.
Exactly. In Report 8, we saw the early warning signs, but now it's hitting us full force. The Canadian dollar is all over the place. Mexican bond yields are jumping, and Canada is even stockpiling goods. It's like everyone is reacting to how unpredictable things are.
Totally. And remember how in Report 8, Bill pointed to lumber tariffs as a potential risk? Well, now he's saying it could actually cause a slowdown in U.S. housing, which is a big deal. What do you think this means for investors who are focused on specific sectors?
I think it really just shows you how interconnected everything is. What seems like a regional issue can have a ripple effect and impact other sectors and even other economies. So investors really need to stay informed and be ready to adapt as the situation unfolds.
Okay, so those ripple effects can come back to bite you in unexpected ways. Now let's shift gears and talk about China for a second. Report 9 had some good news about China. It looks like their retail sales went up after they put some of those stimulus measures into place. But is everything really as good as it seems?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. I mean, Report 8 was pretty optimistic about China's recovery, but Report 9 has some skepticism woven in. Yeah, retail sales are up, but consumer spending is still pretty low, and deflation is a big worry. So it makes you wonder if those stimulus efforts will really be effective in the long run.
So it's like a sugar rush, but the engine might still be sputtering underneath. I know Bill mentioned a couple of companies like BYD and Xiaomi that could benefit in the short term from all of this.
Exactly. Investors have to be careful not to get tricked by short-term gains that are just driven by stimulus. What we really need to be looking at are the underlying fundamentals, and Report 9 really emphasizes that.
I totally agree. Now let's talk tech for a minute. One thing that really jumped out at me in Report 9 was the difference between what's happening in the U.S. versus Japan. It seems like the U.S. tech sector is struggling a bit, but in Japan, it's booming. Their Nikkei is hitting record highs, and it seems like a lot of that is being driven by global demand for AI and semiconductors. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, it's a pretty significant shift from what we were seeing back in Report 8. Back then, all the talk was about the U.S. staying on top of the tech world. But now Report 9 is pointing to a potential power shift with Japan stepping up as a major player in the global tech scene. It really signals a change in how innovation is happening around the world.
Yeah, it's like Japan is finally breaking free from being stuck in the slow lane, and they're ready to make a splash on the world stage. But what about the U.S.? Bill's specifically mentioned that NVIDIA is down, even though they've got really strong fundamentals.
Well, Report 9 brings up how vulnerable even giant U.S. tech companies like NVIDIA are to these trade wars that are going on. Plus, there's the risk of supply chain disruptions and things like that. It's a reminder that what happens in geopolitics has a direct impact on what happens in the tech world.
So even in an industry that's all about innovation and disruption, there's these external factors that can really shake things up. Okay, so we've talked about tariffs and tech now. Are there any under-the-radar trends in Report 9 that we should be paying attention to?
Well, one thing that I thought was interesting was what Singapore is doing to try and attract Asian investors. With all this global uncertainty, it seems like they're positioning themselves as a safe and stable place to invest. Report 9 highlighted how they're offering tax breaks and trying to revitalize their equity market, which seems pretty smart.
Interesting. So they're kind of like a port in a storm. Which sectors in Singapore do you think stand to benefit the most from this strategy?
Report 9 specifically mentioned logistics, infrastructure, and technology as the areas that are likely to see the biggest gains. But, it's important to look at even good news with a critical eye. Are these just short-term wins, or is this part of a bigger long-term plan? Investors need to do their homework.
Yeah, you always have to look at the big picture and not get caught up in the hype. And speaking of the big picture, one of the things that Bill Cara always emphasizes is the importance of thinking for yourself. He really wants investors to outfox Wall Street and become more informed and more discerning. What resonated most with you about Bill's philosophy in this report?
Well, I really appreciate how Report 9 emphasizes that we need to look beyond the headlines and the hype. And that's something that was also in Report 8. Bill wants us to build our own strategies, understand the fundamentals, and make decisions based on critical thinking, not emotions.
He wants to empower investors, not just give them the answers, right?
Exactly. He wants us to become students of the market, not just passive followers. And I think that's more important than ever because there's so much information out there that it can be overwhelming and lead to bad decisions.
So true. What do you think is the most important takeaway from Report 9 for our listeners?
I'd say the most important thing is to develop your own independent thinking. Don't let the noise of the market and the ups and downs distract you from seeing the bigger picture.
It's about taking control, doing your research, and making choices that fit your goals and how much risk you're comfortable with. Now, before we wrap up, there's one thing in Report 9 that I really wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
It's about the success of DeepSeek's AI model. It was developed outside the U.S., and some countries are embracing it while others are banning it. What do you think about this?
It's really fascinating. It shows how innovation in technology is becoming more global. Report 9 even suggests that this could challenge the idea that the U.S. is the leader in tech, especially when it comes to AI.
It's kind of like a Sputnik moment for AI, wouldn't you say?
Mhm.
Do you think this could lead to different regions developing their own separate AI ecosystems? And could that then lead to problems with compatibility or even a kind of technological Cold War?
That's definitely a possibility. On the one hand, you've got the potential for more competition and faster innovation as different regions try to become the leaders in AI. But on the other hand, there's the risk of things becoming fragmented, with worries about data privacy, national security issues, and competing technology standards that make it hard to work together.
It really makes you think about what the future of tech development is going to look like. Will we see more collaboration and connection in the AI landscape, or will it be defined by these regional groups with their own interests?
Well, I don't know about that, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And for investors, it shows how important it is to understand the geopolitical factors that can affect the tech sector, because those factors can create both opportunities and risks.
It's a good reminder that the world is getting more complex and everything is connected.
Definitely what seems like a purely technological development can have ripple effects that touch everything from geopolitics to economics and even social trends.
And Bill Cara always reminds us to be aware of those connections.
Yeah, that global perspective is crucial, especially in today's market. We can't just analyze things in a vacuum. We have to see how everything fits together.
And Bill Cara is a master at giving us that global context. And as a reminder, you can check out all of his work and insights over at billcara.com. You won't regret it.
Yeah, it really puts things into perspective. Bill does such a great job of helping us understand not just what's happening, but why it matters and how all of this might affect our investment decisions. And that brings us to the idea of making informed decisions. We've been talking about how Bill wants us to think for ourselves and really outfox Wall Street. And that means becoming more informed and more careful investors.
Right. It's about going beyond just reacting to the news and really trying to grasp how all of these global forces are interacting.
So for our listeners who are ready to step up their game, what would be your number one piece of advice based on what we've talked about today? That's a good question. I think I would say don't be afraid to question what you think you know. The world is changing so fast that what worked in the past might not work now. Stay curious, keep learning, and be ready to change your approach as things evolve.
I love that. It's about staying flexible and informed in this crazy market. And for more of Bill's amazing insights, you can head over to billcara.com. You won't be disappointed.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from trade wars to tech trends and everything in between. It's clear that the Global Market Navigator Report number 9 isn't just about numbers. It's about understanding the bigger forces that are shaping the world around us.
Absolutely. Bill doesn't just tell us what's happening. He helps us understand why it's important and what it all means for our investments.
And that brings us back to that key idea, making informed decisions. We've talked about how Bill wants us to become independent thinkers, to outfox Wall Street, to become more knowledgeable and more selective investors.
Exactly. It's about not just blindly following the headlines, but really understanding how everything is connected on a global scale. So for our listeners who are ready to take that next step and become better investors, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them based on everything we've discussed today?
Let me see. I'd say the most important thing is to learn to think for yourself. Don't let all the noise and the ups and downs of the market distract you from seeing the big picture.
It's about taking control of your investments, doing your research, and making choices that align with your goals and your risk tolerance. Now, before we wrap up, there was one thing in Report 9 that I really wanted to get your take on. It was about the global success of DeepSeek's AI model. It was developed outside the U.S. And we're seeing this interesting situation where some countries are welcoming it with open arms, while others are banning it outright. What are your thoughts on this?
It's definitely a fascinating development. It really highlights how innovation in the tech world is becoming more and more global. Report 9 even suggests that this could challenge the U.S.'s position as the dominant force in tech, especially when it comes to AI.
It's almost like a Sputnik moment for the world of AI, don't you think? I mean, do you think we could be headed towards a future where different regions develop their own separate AI ecosystems? If that happens, could we see problems with different systems not being compatible with each other, or even a kind of technological Cold War between different blocks?
Well, that's certainly a possibility. On the one hand, you have the potential for increased competition, which could actually lead to faster innovation as each region tries to become the leader in AI. But on the other hand, there's also the risk of fragmentation, with concerns about data privacy, national security, and all these different technology standards that might not work well together.
It really makes you think about what the future holds for the development of technology. Are we going to see a more collaborative and interconnected AI landscape? Or will it be more divided with each region having its own separate systems and interests?
Well, I guess time will tell, but it's definitely something worth paying attention to. And for investors, it's a reminder that you have to be aware of the geopolitical factors that can influence the tech sector, because those factors can create both opportunities and risks.
It's a good reminder that the world is becoming more and more complex. And what might seem like a purely technological event can actually have a ripple effect across many different areas, from geopolitics to economics and even social trends. And Bill Cara always does a great job of helping us see those connections.
Yeah, that global perspective is so crucial, especially in today's market. You can't just look at things in isolation. You have to understand how they all fit together.
And Bill Cara is a master at providing that context. And just a reminder for everyone, you can explore all of his work and insights over at billcara.com. You won't be disappointed. It's amazing how he can connect all the dots.
Yeah, that's so important.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything today, from those crazy trade wars to the big shifts in tech and everything in between. It's really clear that this Global Market Navigator Report number 9 isn't just about looking at the numbers. It's about getting a deeper understanding of the forces that are shaping our world.
Yeah, I totally agree. Bill doesn't just give us the facts. He helps us figure out what it all means and how it could affect us as investors.
And that brings us back to the idea of making smart decisions and how Bill always encourages us to think for ourselves, to outfox Wall Street, to become more informed and more selective with our investments.
Right, it's about going beyond just reacting to the headlines and digging deeper to really understand how all these global forces are connected.
So for our listeners who are ready to take their investing to the next level, what would be your top piece of advice based on everything we've talked about today?
Well, let's see. I think the most important thing is to not be afraid to question your assumptions. The world is changing so quickly. What worked in the past might not work today. So stay curious, keep learning, and be flexible enough to adapt your strategies as things change.
I love that. It's all about being adaptable and informed in this ever-changing market. And don't forget, for more of Bill Cara's incredible insights and analysis, you can visit his website, billcara.com. You won't regret it. Well, that about wraps it up for this deep dive into Global Market Navigator Report number 9. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I hope you all got some valuable insights out of it. Until next time, happy investing, everyone.